3 speakers today. Elizabeth Juchems from Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, and she's going to be talking about the Water Rocks program there. Kate Reilly from the University of Wisconsin Extension is going to be talking about ThinkWater, which is a national project to rethink how we're doing water outreach and education. And Techtmann from the University of Wisconsin Extension is going to be talking about a program working with tribal communities on changing climate and changing culture. And if you could move the slides forward, Janice. Okay, Elizabeth Juchems is the event coordinator and an educator for Water Rocks and Iowa Learning Farms. When she's not out in the Water Rocks team at a school visit, she manages the Iowa Learning Farms Cover Crop Research Project, and she's at the Iowa Cover Crop Conference today. So she's a foot in each world today. She communicates with ILF farm partners and organizes field days, workshops, and Water Rocks visits. Juchems earned a bachelor's degree in Ag Business Economics from Iowa State University and a master's degree in Agricultural Economics at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So thanks very much, Elizabeth, and take it away. Elizabeth, we cannot hear you, and just make sure you have your talk button pressed. Yes, it's pressed now. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. All right, so good afternoon. It's my pleasure to kick off this webinar series with Water Rocks. It is Iowa statewide education youth campaign for all things water. As was mentioned, my name is Elizabeth Juchems. I'm the events coordinator and one of the educators for the program. And we are based at Iowa State University here in Ames. And our Water Rocks is a multi-faceted program that looks to combine STEM with the arts and challenge and encourage everyone to have a greater appreciation for all things water. So to do that, one of the unique ways that we communicate a lot of our handouts, activities, is through our website at www.waterrocks.org. So today, the purpose of my presentation is to kind of highlight some of the resources that we have available that we use here in Iowa, but are also useful outside of Iowa, throughout the region, and throughout the wider U.S. So all of our materials are produced with local Iowa talent, and again, we appreciate and want to share a lot of our resources that are free and available via our website. So a little bit about what we do. As mentioned in my bio there, we do a lot of school visits. So in 2014, we were able to visit 122 different events, reaching about 15,000 different learners. And then through our website, we also reach an expanded group of interested schools and learners and extension staff. As we move on today, I'm going to highlight one of our great resources called Rock Your Watershed. It's a great interactive game. We also have 13 geocaches placed at Iowa State Parks. We offer an internship and a summit opportunity. And I'm going to wrap up my presentation today with highlighting some of our video series. So, about our outreach, as I mentioned, it is free, available on our website. It's educational. It's ready to use. It was evaluated with kids. It was designed using the next generation standards in Iowa Core, which is kind of our educational standards here in Iowa. And we took them out. We've used them with kids and evaluated that. And so far, they're well received, and we hope that you find them as fun and interesting as we do. So moving on to our Rock Your Watershed game. So I encourage you, after the conclusion of this webinar, to check out our website. On the left-hand side, there's a tab that says Rock Your Watershed. is an opportunity to use your own decisions to develop different land parcels and see how that impacts your watershed. So what's unique about this game is that it does combine information on soil erosion, nutrient transport, precipitation, and land management choices that you make, as well as trying to balance not only your environmental impact, your water quality impact, but your costs and profits generated from your decisions. So when you get in, check that tab. You can get to this page where you have 10 parcels of land, select a parcel. You can choose between 4 different land covers. So we've got corn and soybeans with a buffer, corn and soybeans with a wetland, and then perennial cover. So once you've selected your land use, if you selected a corn or soybean rotation, you then get to choose your level of nitrates or nitrogen that you apply, and then also the type of tillage that you want to do in your operation. And again, you'll see down at the bottom of the land use choices, there's different dollar amounts that kind of gives you an idea of what it's going to cost to implement those practices. So again, as you're trying to balance your environmental impact with your profits and costs, you can keep that in mind. So you can go ahead and develop all 10 parcels of land. You can go back and change one if you want to move your wetland or move your buffer. And then once you're happy with all of your different choices, you can select the Make It Rain button. And what that does is then, just like in real life, introduces that chance that comes with real agricultural production. So you're randomly assigned a level of rainfall, low, medium, or high, and then using an algorithm, it incorporates scientific data on soil erosion, nutrient transport, and yield potentials to then generate these outputs. So you get a score for profits, your nitrogen leaching, your phosphorus loss, and your sedimentation or erosion from your land management choices. So as you can see here, the further green that you can get those bars, the higher that your overall score will be. And so that algorithm then processes all of your choices, comes up with how much money you were able to generate from your crop production, and then how much impact you're having on the environment. And this game was designed and tested with 7th graders, and we had one student who decided to play this game 19 times to determine what kind of strategy it might take to get to number 1. And so once you get your final score, you can enter in your initials and where you're from and see if you can get on our leaderboard. And we keep an overall leaderboard, so check back frequently to see how you rank against others. So also on our website, we have a plethora of videos available. So again, trying to combine the arts with the STEM. And so one way we do that is through music videos as well as PSAs and other video series. So here we've got some screenshots of some of our more popular music videos. We've got the drinking song there, a creative way of an ode to drinking water from the tap. We also have We All Live in a Watershed that can be used for all ages, but talks about how all of our water is connected through our land management choices, precipitation, and how what we really do to our landscapes has an impact beyond the borders of our properties and beyond our lawns and our front yards. And then the last one there with the Hula Girl is our ode to the floating island of plastic out in the Pacific Ocean near Hawaii. So these, like I said earlier in our presentation, although these are developed with local Iowa talent, these videos address topics that are relevant well beyond the borders of Iowa and even beyond the region in the Midwest here. The next series I'd like to highlight is our public service announcements called What's in Your Water. And so it takes a unique and interesting approach to looking at different water quality issues that happen from either our land management choices in an agricultural setting or even in our own backyards. So it asks the questions, if raindrops were rubber ducks, it'd be a lot easier to see what is in our water. And so it's a really great video series that kind of highlights the different water quality issues that may be impacting our drinking water. Our last video series I'd like to highlight here is our Adventures with a Conservation Pack. And we are a team here at Water Rocks. And so like any team, we've got our mascots that happen to be our pack of dogs. They're Charlie, Jackie, and Stewie, and they help us when we do our school visits and outreach, because we do K-12 education. So they get a chance to go out and visit with landowners and farmers, researchers, passionate conservationists, and ask them about their jobs, what they're doing in terms of water quality, water issues, land management choices. And it's kind of a unique approach to some of these maybe more complex scientific topics that make them relatable to kids through these interviews. And just to kind of remind you again where you can find these videos, they are available on our website as well as YouTube and TeacherTube, which is kind of like the educational version of YouTube if you're unfamiliar with it. And between these two sites, we've got 70+ videos available, and we're pretty honored to be recognized by the Iowa Motion Picture Association in 2014 with 15 of their awards that recognize not only content but as well as creativity and design. So be sure to check them out, get a chuckle, good laugh. We enjoy making them and hope you enjoy watching them. And how this all ties together then is through our enhanced learning activities. So we've got the videos out there. They're a great resource, and then to complement those in the classroom or in an after-school activity, we've developed these activities that are, again, free as PDFs to download from our website. You can print out as many copies as you need or make copies. And again, these align with the next generation standards and the Iowa Core. And so they expand on the topics touched on in the videos with either hands-on activities or maybe their worksheets or just ideas that you can do with the kids that you're working with. And so to try and stick within my time limit here, I'm going to kind of wrap this up with a reminder of where you can find all of our information at waterrocks.org. And I'd also like to give a brief thank you shout out to our funding partners, including the Iowa DNR through their US EPA 319 Clean Water Act funding, the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture, the Iowa Water Center, the Iowa Learning Farms, Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, and personal gifts of support from Iowans and all interested parties. So I look forward to answering your questions later in the session, and thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You get another award for perfect timing. Okay, we'll move. Thank you so much. We'll move right ahead to Kate Reilly. So Kate is an environmental education specialist at the University of Wisconsin Extension. She studies conservation program development and instructional design for both youth and adult learners. She's had a long history of involvement in community-based environmental education and in both the public and private sector, and her work has included work with the National Extension Water Outreach Education Project, National Youth Riparian Education Initiative, Drinking Water and Human Health E-Extension Program, and the new Junior Duck Stat curriculum. She is dedicated to finding innovative ways to increase natural resource literacy and stewardship across Wisconsin and the country. So thanks, Kate, and take it away.
Well, hello, and thanks everyone for joining us today, and thanks to this team for having this opportunity for us to share information about youth water. So today I'm going to talk about the ThinkWater project, and it's a USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture funded project, which will end its fourth and final year of funding in August of this year. In the next 10 minutes, I hope to spark your interest in knowing more about this project. I'm really hoping you'll be intrigued enough to learn to apply these thinking strategies to your existing and new materials. And ultimately, I hope you'll join this movement to start a national dialogue and practice among water educators around thinking. So I'm going to start with a story. It's a recent experience in this setting, a North Carolina state park. It's about an experience that a colleague, Wendy, who's a county educator in North Carolina, had. She was teaching a class, a fifth grade class about watersheds at a local state park. Her post-course assessments looked really good, but she discovered at a classroom follow-up that students didn't think their school grounds or their homes were in a watershed because those places didn't look at all like the state park that they were learning in. So really, how did Wendy's assessments kind of miss the mark? Where did things go wrong? Wendy's story illustrates what many educators, including myself, have experienced, and some of you may have experienced as well. We know that just presenting information doesn't lead to knowledge. Something has to happen in between. If information created knowledge on its own, we'd all be geniuses by tuning into the internet. So we know that information doesn't just magically lead to knowledge. So we apply best education practices that get us from I to K. But after many years as a practicing water educator and as a student of water education practice, I puzzled over the prospect that these best practices were getting kids to think critically or at all about the topic. Wouldn't it be great if we as educators could see thinking? What would it look like? How would you recognize it? And even more significantly, what if you could show your students how to see their own thinking about water? Would it lead to better impacts? Would it lead to caring? Would it lead to more engagement? This, to me, is the promise of ThinkWater. So what is the ThinkWater project about? Well, it's about what we as water educators can do to help our students construct knowledge out of information. We can help you do this by applying meta-thinking techniques when developing and delivering education programs. Metacognition, or simply just thinking about our thinking, is at the heart of ThinkWater. Why should you invest your time and efforts in thinking? Research on metacognition tells us that we can bump up the thinking meter in our educational endeavors by joining science content with the science of thinking. Dr. Derek Cabrera, a cognitive scientist, has created a way to map thinking so we can see it. Cabrera Labs in Ithaca, New York is working in numerous school districts throughout the country. These districts have adopted this teaching strategy and are realizing dramatic impacts on learning and engagement. A Think STEM initiative has proven to be very effective in science education efforts, and work with museums and other non-formal venues have been equally successful. What makes meta-thinking unique is that it's a force multiplier for existing water education resources. ThinkWater isn't creating new water content or lessons, it's making existing lessons even better. Finally, ThinkWater is a movement to introduce thinking into all our education efforts for both youth and adults. It's a catalyst for a national discussion around water education and how we can increase knowledge, engagement, and caring from K to Gray through thinking. The ThinkWater evaluation team is working on 3 assessment components. They're investigating not just if change occurred, but also why it occurred. The proof of concept tested the ThinkWater protocols, lessons, and assessment tools. And then we're isolating variables that we believe are most pivotal to desired outcomes, which is thinking being central. So study 1 is looking at the impacts of our Thinkified lessons compared to original water lessons. And study 2 is looking at the effects of training and thinking on teacher practice. And of course, for students, we're measuring water knowledge, metacognition, caring about water, and engagement. So if you're ready for thinking, here are some ways that you can learn more. This is our homepage at waterthinkers.org, and there are 2 important tabs on the homepage for learning more. One is called What is ThinkWater, which is down here, and the other is Get Started. So I would suggest either of those as a way to learn more. On the What is ThinkWater page, you'll find this video, which is a 2-minute video, and it provides a short introduction to metacognition and to the ThinkWater project. Also on what is ThinkWater, you will find another film. This is a 12-minute film, and it's called A Little Film About a Big Idea, and it shows the hidden life of ideas and how thinking occurs unconsciously during every waking moment and how we can see thinking. So baby steps into learning more about the whole concept of meta-thinking. Then if you go to the Get Started page, you'll find top-rated Thinkified water lessons. Right now we have 5 commonly used water education activities that have been Thinkified or altered to incorporate the ThinkWater teaching strategies. The videos demonstrate the traditional lesson, such as wetland in a pan shown here, and then illustrates the Thinkified version so you can see the differences between the traditional lesson and the Thinkified lesson. Once educators start Thinkifying their own lessons, they can post them on site to create a crowdsourced inventory. They can test and rate lessons created by others, and they'll be able to watch the best of the best water lessons rise to the top of the Thinkified water lesson list. Also on the Get Started page, you'll find Teaching Thinking 101. This is a fun online course. You can do at your own pace. It's designed to immediately transfer to practice. And it was originally designed for classroom teachers, but it really is a good piece for non-formal educators as well. It has everything you need to learn the most important skills in teaching and learning. You'll also find a ThinkQuery resource. This is a fun activity that helps teachers and students ask better questions about content and then allows them to map their thinking using a tool called MetaMaps. The maps communicate the information, but also the meta-thinking structures. Simply type a word or phrase into our tool, and 20 meta-thinking questions are generated, kind of Mad Lib style. You can learn to use the MetaMaps tool for lessons planning and assessment. You can use it to build thinking into your existing water activities. This slide illustrates, and I apologize for the fact that you can't read any detail in it, but it gives you a sense of what the MetaMaps are like. And this particular set of MetaMaps are the ones that go with the wetland in a pan activity. So on those videos, you'll see how it all connects throughout the activity. As our time today is really limited, I'm only able to touch on a few of these things, but I encourage you to explore all of the ThinkWater tools as you go along. All right. So just a few other things. I promised to say a few words about the new grant that we've received. We'll be starting phase 2 called Growing Knowledge to Solve Water Problems. This is a new AFRI grant that will start in March of this year. It's a new 4-year effort and will be focused on continued testing of the ThinkWater teaching strategies and developing a national dissemination tool or strategy for the ThinkWater project. Phase 2 will also have a new focus on adult learners while continuing to grow water thinkers among youth and youth educators. And these are a few of the more specific things we hope to be investigating. So you can check it all out at waterthinkers.org, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kate. This is, you can see ThinkWater is more of a way to look at our existing water education and outreach programs. As I said in the chat, I recommend checking out the site and checking out that MetaMaps tool. It's a great tool for any educator to think through the development of a program. Okay, let's keep our fingers crossed and hope we're going to have Kathy Techtmann be able to talk with us. Kathy, do you want to say hello just quickly, make sure we can hear you?
Hi, this is Kathy. Can everyone hear me? I apologize for the technology patch up here.
Sounds good to me. Okay, let's go for it. Let's go for it. All right. So Kathy is a professor of community resource development and University of Wisconsin Extension Environmental Outreach State Specialist. She holds a master's degree in natural resource management with an interpretation emphasis and a bachelor's degree and teaching certificate in biology from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Yay, pointers. Her major initiatives include providing leadership for the University of Wisconsin Extension Freshwater Estuary and Coastal Wetlands Program, leading to a 2010 Lake Superior Natural Estuarine Research Reserve designation. Kathy received the 2012 UW Colleges and Extension Chancellor's Award for Excellence, and in 2013 she received the U.S. Forest Service's Eastern Region Honor Award for Courageous Conservation. Kathy is a member of the University of Wisconsin Extension Native American Task Force, the Wisconsin Consortium for Environmental Education, and the Wisconsin Environmental Education Association Board, as well as a NOAA Climate Steward. So thank you so much, Kathy, and look forward to your presentation.
Okay, keep our fingers crossed. Bonjour, or hello, my name is Kathy Techtmann, or Kat Techtmann, and today I'd like to share with you the Gikinoo'wizhiwe Onji Waaban, which means Guiding for Tomorrow in Ojibwe, which for obvious reasons I'm going to call GWOW, Changing Climate Changing Culture Initiative. And if things advance correct, oh, this is perfect. Okay, I'm going to make this short. I've got a lot more slides than I can cover, so I'm hoping that you'll use them as a resource. I'm going to go through them quickly. You'll see our major project partners who I want to highlight, obviously UW Extension, the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission representing the 11 Ojibwe tribes in the ceded territory of northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center, the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore National Park Service, and the U.S. Forest Service Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest. With technical support from WICI, the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts, the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, Climate Wisconsin, and our wonderful funders, Great Lakes Restoration, Wisconsin Coastal Management, NOAA, and the National Parks Foundation. The project location, the geography we're talking about here, is within the Ojibwe ceded territory, particularly the Lake Superior Basin. Based out of the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center in Ashland, the model that I'm going to share with you is applicable to other locations. So let me start by prefacing this by saying that the Lake Superior Ojibwe have had generations of relationships with the plant and animal species of the Lake Superior area. And they relied on the sustainability of these species to support subsistence, cultural, and spiritual practices that we call lifeways. And they have what we call traditional ecological knowledges of these systems that provide us place-based indicators of climate change. The roots of our project began about in 2007-ish. There was increasing evidence that climate change was affecting the sustainability of our communities, our cultures, economics in the Lake Superior region. Obviously, Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission was concerned about climate change impacts on treaty rights within the ceded territory. The Park Service and Forest Service were concerned about public safety and management. And as an extension educator, I was looking at different climate change education models and realizing that they really weren't resonating with audiences. So all of our organizations, all individuals representing these different partners came together as what we call the GWOW team to create a new climate change model that I want to share with you today. So I'm just going to go over this very quickly. We know that the climate is changing within our area, and I just want to point out on here, particularly in Wisconsin, northwestern Wisconsin, which includes a lot of the ceded territory, we're seeing temperature increases and some extreme weather that's affecting all of the concerns that I just shared in the previous slide. We know we've had overall warming, and again, I direct your attention to that northern area of Wisconsin. You can see much more intense warming, warmer winters, and more extreme weather, especially kind of gusher rain events. Again, I direct your attention to that northern part of the state where the ceded territory is, and the Ojibwe people are concerned about treaty rights and the impact of climate change on species. So we also have place-based evidence of climate change that we can see with our own eyes. 2007 through 2012, we had disruptions in the wild rice harvest of the Lake Superior Ojibwe. The first and second times in history, oral history and also recorded history, that the rice harvest the Manoomin or rice harvest has had to be canceled. We've had extreme flooding last year, but the rice harvest wasn't affected. But tribal elders say that this is unprecedented, what's happening. We also have seen decreases in Lake Superior ice cover at Bayfield, and flooding in northern Wisconsin or southern Wisconsin, and Lake Superior being at record lows over the last couple years. Now it's finally achieving normal pond level this year. So we did some research to try to find out how we could create a new way to help people understand climate change. And what we found was some research from the Psychology of Climate Change Communication from Columbia University that says local place-based evidence of climate change gained through experiential learning is as or more effective than simply studying analytical climate change data to increase climate change literacy. In other words, what we can see with our own eyes, if we can analyze that together with scientific knowledge, we're going to increase our chances of our learners really understanding what's happening. So we came up with some key principles as we reflected on this research. And again, we're talking about not only state but federal agencies here. So some of these, I think they really stepped up to the plate on. Climate change is real. Humans contribute to climate change. Obviously, weather and climate are different. Climate affects cultures, whether it's tribal cultures or non-tribal cultures, and we can make a difference. And these are kind of the root principles behind the GWAL model. So let's just get to the model itself, what makes it really unique. Because there are other models out there that integrate tribal perspectives with climate change science, but GWAL is unique in this way. It's based on understanding how climate change affects the habitat conditions needed for the sustainability of key plant or animal species that support a cultural practice. Because of this linkage, it creates a culturally relevant climate change perspective. It links place-based evidence with climate change research. It makes the model transferable across different cultures that I'll show you in just a second. And this model is also a service learning model, so that we try to get learners to understand more about climate, increase their climate literacy, but also to take action. And it uses the impact of climate change and Ojibwe cultural practices as an indicator of a changing climate for all cultures. So here's an example of applying the GWAL model. Manoomin, which is the Ojibwe word for wild rice, is an important species for subsistence, spiritual, and ceremonial practices. This wild rice harvesting or Manoomin harvesting depends on the sustainability of wild rice. That's kind of obvious. And the sustainability of wild rice depends on habitats with shallow water, moderate water level fluctuations, and cool growing seasons. And if you can harken back to that earlier slide that I flashed through, we talk about shallow water and moderate water level fluctuations. If you remember that map that I showed you, and you can see there in the lower part of the screen, we have been and will be experiencing more gusher rain events according to climate change projections. What does this tell us from what we've seen in place-based evidence? Climate change is affecting the sustainability of Manoomin. And what does science say? Do the two agree? Do culture and science agree? And we're finding that they do. Here's a couple other examples. Here's a cultural practice I think we could relate to. We might be maple syrup harvesters ourselves, or maybe we just like eating maple syrup on pancakes. The key species that's involved here is sugar maple, which requires cool, moist forest conditions and cold winters for sugar production. What about place-based and scientific evidence? Over the last several years, except for last year, we saw increasing impacts through place-based evidence on maple syrup harvesters and producers, serious declines in our maple syrup production. What about the science? What does it say? And I just picked one of the scientific maps from the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change, and you can see the projected frequency of days over 90 degrees through the year 2055. What does this mean for the sustainability of sugar maple as a tree that we rely on for businesses that are sugar maple businesses, or even if we just like maple syrup ourselves? Here's another example, cultural practice, brook trout fishing. Obviously it relies on brook trout, and I think we all know what habitat conditions the trout needs. We're seeing place-based evidence of many of our streams drying up or temperatures increasing that are not sustainable to brook trout. And if again we look at climate projections from Wiki, especially for the northern part of the state, we can see significant warming that is projected. What does this mean for the sustainability of brook trout and cultural practices that rely on brook trout, such as just the recreational practice of brook trout fishing? And climate models do suggest that up to 95% of brook trout habitat across Wisconsin could be lost if the annual average temperatures increases over 5 degrees. And as you can see from the map that is included on this slide, that increase is going to be significantly more than that. Okay, here's a cultural practice. This is a fun one, snowboarding, just for a test. And I'll just let you work through this. Key species we don't have here, but we have habitat conditions. And as we can see in place-based evidence and scientific evidence, over the last several years, we've had a diminishing of snow cover, and in the future, warming temperatures will mean we will have more ice than snow. What does this mean for cultural practices, whether they're recreational or maybe even business practices that rely on snow cover? So the GWAP curriculum guides learners to look at whether culture and science agree. How is climate change affecting the key species? What is the future for the Ojibwe Lifeway? But what does this mean? How does this indicate changes for cultural practices that you enjoy or your environment that your community relies on? And what can we do to mitigate those impacts? The target audiences for the curriculum are students, teachers, and general public, middle school and above learners, including adults. The outreach tools we've developed are the GWAL curriculum, which is the full curriculum representing the model, teacher training institutes, and a discovery center at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center. All have experiential learning pieces with them, Ojibwe language and tech information infused, and have multicultural perspectives. Let's just take a look at one of them. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to do the website, but it is www.g-wow.org. It's an online climate change service learning curriculum. And I'll just point out some of the highlights of the web model. And this is the Ojibwe Lifeway section, as you can see in the orange circle. It talks about that. It gives 4 different seasonal lifeways and the place-based evidence of climate change on sustainability of key species of those 4 lifeways. The investigate the science piece has climate change science from Wiki, federal, state, and tribal sources, and soon to have NASFA sources included. The What Can We Do element is a template for students to create service learning climate change projects based on the GWAL model. And the talking circle element on the left, the green circle, is a place where students and learners can share the results of their projects. Any of these elements within the GWAL model could be used as standalone or could be used in sequence. So the GWAL curriculum, again, examines place-based evidence of climate change using 4 Ojibwe lifeways, scientific research that integrates with place-based evidence. Learners conduct a service learning project, and they report the results on a blog. There are activity guides within the online curriculum that guide students and learners through this. Here's just a quick slide on the different Lifeway units that you can just take a look at. I won't explain them, but you can get a flavor for the different perspectives that we're offering on the web curriculum. There are other resources here as well, teacher resources, climate change literacy basics, games, etc. The teacher institutes that we offer are 4-day experiential professional development institutes based on the GWAL model. This year, the 13th through the 16th of July, and we'd invite any of you to join us at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center and tribal communities surrounding the area. And you can see some of the activities that we do, a climate walk on Stockton Island, investigations of climate change impacts on the Badurukakagan wild rice beds, and even activities such as making a Nushkashkanagan from birch, which is one of the species that is already impacted by climate change in the northern regions of the state. Here's a couple impact indicators from our institutes. We have just under 100 teachers trained so far. We have about 30 teachers accepted per institute. That's about all we can handle with the capacity that we have. About 80% have increased or significantly increased their climate change literacy, and we have teachers now reporting back their student climate change projects on the website. I think one of the most telling evidences of impact would be the quote on the bottom of that slide that I'll let you read for yourself. And the teacher that contributed this quote, she and I will be presenting at the National Green Schools Conference in March, the GWAL model and her application in her school.
Thank you, Kathy, very much.
Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, questions for our speakers in the last 4 minutes. Okay, well, I have one for Kathy. Kathy, you have cultural elements and linking cultural elements to science, and it seems like that certainly applies beyond working with tribal communities. And I'm just curious, over your time as an educator, what has this project taught you about outreach programs more broadly, or do you have any lessons learned that you'd like to share with us?
Are you speaking of lessons learned with tribal communities?
Just, it seems like really you've made explicit that the value in looking at cultural knowledge, whether it's traditional ecological knowledge or other kinds of cultural knowledge, and science, and looking at the similarities and differences in the conclusions that both of those ways of knowing are coming to. And in my experience, we don't often make that explicit. So I'm just wondering, you've shared one curriculum with us, but have you learned anything from this curriculum that applies more broadly across your teaching?
Yes, I think that the GWAL project has really shown to me that using place-based evidence and cultural perspectives is really an important way of making environmental science come alive to students. Many people, whether they're students or adults, when presented only with scientific perspectives, it doesn't resonate with everyone as well. But if you can bring this home to a real-world understanding where they can touch it, feel it, observe it, and test it out within their own community, within their own culture or environment, it's going to resonate and stick with them a lot more than if it's something that's more arm's length away. So I think that this model actually has taught me really the value of incorporating those cultural perspectives whenever possible when we're dealing with environmental science. And the other thing that I wanted to add is that it doesn't have to be tribal cultural perspectives either. We all come from different cultures and different communities, and there's ways that we can, again, integrate the scientific pieces with our own cultural pieces.
Thank you, Kathy. And do each of our speakers, Elizabeth and Kate, can you stay on for a few more minutes because we got started a little bit late? If we could just go, if you can't, that's fine. But if we agree to go 5 more minutes, and then those of other folks that are participating in the webinar, of course, you all can do whatever you need to do to keep yourself on time. But Elizabeth and Kate, can you stay on for a few more minutes?
I can stay on. This is Kate.
Elizabeth, can you stay on? We weren't able to hear you.
This is Kathy. There's a question that I might be able to be helpful with.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, there was a question, I think it was from Christy, and the question is, what are some examples of cultural implications, especially for people who are not connected to the outdoors or subsistence? I'll give you an example of how this model could be applied. One of the teachers in our institute last year was a science teacher from South Milwaukee, whose students were not necessarily connected with the environment very well, or they certainly didn't use it for subsistence. He asked me, how can I use the GWO model with my students? And I said, well, what cultural practice do your students really like? And he said, Friday night fish fries. Now, granted, this is subsistence, but not really. I said to him, okay, then let's think about this. What do Friday night fish fries rely on? Well, obviously, the sustainability of perch. And we were able then to look at place-based impacts on perch. Students were able to either interview fishers within the area, look at perch prices, et cetera, things like that, place-based evidence of what was happening, and then compare it to what was scientific research was saying would be happening to habitat conditions that perch required. The GWO model is all based on understanding the habitat conditions that species require for sustainability, and then looking at place-based evidence of how that is changing and what science is saying could be projected changes based on how climate is changing.
Thanks for the question, Christy, and thanks for the answer, Kathy. Other questions from the group? Okay, I have one for Kate. Kate, can you tell us a little bit, did you investigate existing curriculum and how many of those curriculum were involved metacognition or involved, any of the characteristics of a thinkified lesson?
Well, we took examples of existing curriculum and did the thinkifying ourselves. When we originally thought about this project back 6 or 7 years ago, we did a literature search, and there really wasn't much evidence showing what thinking was looking like in terms of assessment back then. And in youth water education efforts in general across the United States, evaluation was pretty basic. There weren't a whole lot of really robust studies that looked particularly at metacognition or critical thinking. So the lessons we chose, the whole idea of ThinkWater is we're not creating new content, we're not creating new lessons. We're just, because there's great content out there, we're just creating a way or teaching a way to change those lessons up a bit to include the metacognition.
Thank you. And for all of you, are you available to maybe provide some feedback to other folks, or what's your interest in working with other people on projects that are similar to the ones that you're working on? One of the goals of the North Central Region Water Network is to help connect folks that are have the kind of expertise and resources that you have. So are you would you be available to help other folks if they were interested in contacting you?
This is Kathy. Yes, I would be very interested, and in fact, we would welcome people to use and apply the GWO model in their own cultures and post their models or their findings on the website. But even prior to that, I would be more than happy to share any perspectives on this with others.
And we'd be happy to discuss anything with any interested parties and see what we can develop.
And this is Kate. Oops. This is Kate. On the ThinkWater site, there is a sign-up button at the top of the homepage, and if you click on that and fill out the form, it actually will allow you to start playing with the meta maps and you know, playing with this. And after you do that, then you'll probably have a lot of questions about your existing lessons and how to make this transition. And I would say absolutely give us a call, and let's discuss how we could make that happen.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. These are great programs. We thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time to share them with us. Again, this webinar will be posted on the North Central Region Water Network website for future viewing. So please share those if you know people that might be interested in the information. Our next webinar, as I said in the beginning, is April 15th on managing agricultural drainage water.